Andy Consovoy. Good evening, Andy, and welcome. How are you tonight?
Hello.
Hi, Andy. You're on. How are you this evening?
I'm on.
How are
you?
I am good, Andy. We spoke today, and it's always nice to hear your voice. I'll tell you, you are a fighting gentleman for justice. And I started the show, Andy, talking about these two young men, these police officers that were shot down. It's disgusting.
I heard your whole thing.
Yeah.
I heard your whole opening, and I will tell you that I couldn't disagree with a word of that if somebody paid me.
Andy, you're funny.
It's right now. What's going on is more than disgusting. It's criminal, and when the politicians are acting like they don't care about public safety, or are just being completely off the wall with their theories, then ultimately the power rests with the people and get them out. But it's a disgrace. It's an absolute disgrace. And I've been around this business a long time, too long for most, and this is horrible.
It is horrible.
It's horrible.
And the victims are left behind, Andy, to suffer. The parents, the wives, the children, and criminal justice. The unfairness of the system to victims left behind. I mean, the wife and the child and the parents of these two wonderful police officers that were only out there trying to defend us. And they should just throw the book, give them the chair, whatever they do now.
I have no problem with that. I remember all those arguments for a while that went on, particularly in New Jersey. And again, that was the Senator John Russo. I think, I don't know if he's alive or not. I hope he is. Johnny Russo from Ocean County had the last death penalty bill in, and of course they could never get one through the court, so they finally gave up.
So capital punishment is not in New Jersey? We don't have capital punishment here?
No.
Oh, wow. And this is
unless they put it back after I left, which would be great, but I doubt it.
I doubt it. And, we need it in this state. There's a lot of crime in New Jersey. Every state needs it.
Of course we do. The whole, whoever likes what I have to say or not, I would be sorry if they didn't, but that's the way it goes when you speak.
Mm-hmm.
But, the notion that... taking his life is, taking a life is wrong. It's people say two wrongs don't make a right. Sometimes they do.
Mm-hmm.
And what we need to do, really, truly, is stop sloganeering with two wrongs don't make a right. Or
right.
There's so many cases that get overturned. Let them do it. That's what they're there for.
Mm-hmm.
They get paid for it.
Absolutely. And
we pay them to do that. And then they tell us, well, we're too busy or we don't want to do it. We have, so as far as I'm concerned, we have turned upside down here. And I don't want to stop ranting and raving in a minute. But we've turned upside down
right.
with the people that we pay.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not counting the police officers. When I came in driving home, 3 more were murdered in Houston today.
Oh.
So we're rolling right along.
Because they don't want to, and you hear their chief say, "Oh, well, we're very proud because the gunman, took 5-6 shots. They were wounded, but the police officer never let a bullet out of his gun. Why not? I mean, they're kind of, I don't like to use the word damned, but they're damned if they do and damned if they don't. And
I couldn't imagine being a policeman in this day and age.
No.
You don't, with all these, all this.
Horrible.
There's so much nonsense that goes out.
Mm-hmm.
Like somehow or other that, they say, well, prison doesn't do them any good. So?
Right.
Just keep them away. Keep them where they belong. I'm not talking about, sentencing everybody for 100 years. But for God's sake, goodness sake, we've got to get back to fundamentals. And it just makes me insane.
You are so right. You are so right.
It's so wrong and so terrible.
Yeah, Andy, why should these criminals be allowed to live a life in society when they don't fit into society? I'm sorry. They're not following rules or regulations. We all have to do it. Nobody wants to do it, but they can't have the world as their oyster because, I mean, better than me. And when we come back, we're going to talk about some of the cases. We're going to go to a break in just a minute, Andy, but I want, I'd like you to tell us, the horrors of the judicial system, that it's not for the victim. It's of course, it's for the killer, or it's for the suspect that's committed the crime, and that is awful. The victim never gets their rights, and we know.
Oh, I agree. I mean, basically, you have to go, but everybody runs around talking about I speak for the victims. No, you don't.
Right. You're right.
No, you don't.
You're right.
You represent the victims, but don't tell them. Just don't. 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 It's dumb, and I'll let you go.
It is. We're going to go to our break. The victim always remains the victim. It doesn't matter if it's a year or 20 years later. A mother of a child, it's the victim. So, Andy,
you're not kidding. I got some stuff on that you might. Your visitors might want to hear.
Our listeners, when we come back, we're visiting with Andy Consovoy, retired chairman of the New Jersey State Parole Board. That's quite a title, Andy, and you've done everything you can. You're a wonderful gentleman. You fight for justice, and we're going to be back to have our conversation with Andy. Please stay with us after these very important messages.
Now back to the Lorry Young Show on News Talk 1400 WOND.
Welcome back. Yes, bless the beasts, our beautiful animals, and bless the children. They need to be protected, and our seniors also. We are visiting this evening. It's always an honor to have Andy Consovoy on the show, retired chairman, quite a title, of the New Jersey State Parole Board. And Andy was an integral part in putting Joan D'Alessandro's killer behind bars. If not for Andy, who knows if this deviant murderer would have been back on the street, still, murdering children at that time. He died in prison in June of 2021. Thank you, Lord. Andy Consovoy was with the office of the Governor Thomas H. Kane, the capacity of appointments council special assistant. And Andy retired his career, as I said before, as chairman of the New Jersey State Parole Board. And Andy, you are also welcome, Andy, and thank you so much for sharing your knowledge, your time with us.
It's always a pleasure. I just wanted to correct myself, because when I came back, before I got here, it said on the radio that the 3 Houston officers were killed, and on your newscast, which I listened to, they said they're still in the hospital. So let's just pray for those guys.
Yes, they do. Who knows? I mean, they say they're in the hospital.
Who knows?
They don't give us. They don't. And he got in a Mercedes and drove away. What?
That sounds like a drug dealer to me. But who am I to judge? Because I'm not investigating.
Yeah, but you are. I mean, you know your stuff, Andy. And Andy.
Yeah, but that's automatic thing. Who rides around in a Mercedes?
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, you never know. Who knows? Maybe it's a stolen Mercedes.
Yes, you know, absolutely, Andy. And let me ask you, so you are also an attorney, Andy?
Yes, I'm retired now, but I was a member of the New Jersey Bar for many years. Okay, now
obviously you were not a of course you must have been a prosecutor in that division?
No, I went from law school right into politics.
Ah, okay.
I had a job, but I was basically into politics.
Mm-hmm.
And
so yeah,
it turns out that after I retired, and I was in a little bit of a situation, because it turns out they wouldn't let me teach in New Jersey. I wanted to teach in high school or middle school in New Jersey, but since I wasn't qualified, I had to take it. They wanted me to go back to. They wanted me to take like 20 courses or 20 credits in New Jersey Teachers College. And I said it's ridiculous.
And you know what? You could teach.
They didn't want me, so what can I tell you?
You could teach. You could teach them, Andy, because with your experience, you know, it's not so much about the book knowledge; it's about being out there. And
I teach history, and I teach it. I taught it, you know, as well as anybody else, and better than most of the young kids who I think the world started in 1965. You know, I'm not going to get started.
Exactly. So, Andy, tell us.
In any case,
go ahead. You tell us. So we want to talk about criminal justice, the unfairness of the system to the victims left behind, and I mean, is there payoffs that are going on behind the scenes? How do these criminals that murder, rape, children and women and senior citizens, how do they get off with just a couple years? Is it just because they have good attorneys? How could these attorneys even defend these disgusting deviants?
Well, I'll give you the magic word, and here we go. Plea bargaining.
Is that? Tell us about the plea bargain system, please.
No, I want to say it beforehand before everybody hates me, but
no, they won't.
I'm not going to make a lot of prosecutors, or some, they all know it. They don't want to hear about it.
It's okay. You're on my show. You say what you feel, Andy. The truth.
I know. I just try to play it straight. But let's just talk about generally or with kids. Well, let's talk about generally.
Yeah, let's do generalization.
The model's the same.
Okay.
The under the laws of Western society, and which preceded any laws in the Eastern world, around 1,000 or so AD, or it's also, but it used to be that clan coming out of the Dark Ages. Clans and clan war. So if you had a clan and you were in one family and I was in one family and I killed your brother, normally that would set off a clan, a
vendetta,
family warfare that would go on forever. It's like the Hatfield, like
and the McCoys, right?
Yeah, exactly. And somebody, when the Danes invaded and then the Anglo-Saxons invaded England, this was before 1000. They brought with them a concept of trying to I'm getting to the point. Trying to eliminate these clan feuds. They felt society could never develop. So then they developed a theory that the state would be the purported victim of the crime, even though it may be your brother laying there. The crime becomes one against the state. And therefore, if you got a gripe with how it turns out, don't kill the other family. Get mad at the state. That's the deal. So when these prosecutions come down now, this has come a long time, and most of these fellows try hard and do a good job. It's not easy for them either. But what happens is, now that the state's in charge of it, what kind of say does the victim have? And it varies between prosecutors in different places, but bottom line is if the state in most cases negotiates a plea bargain. So let's say you're in for second-degree murder, right? You're for second-degree murder and you're facing a charge, a sentence of maybe 30 to 50 years or whatever it may be. They'll drop it on a negotiation, no trial, and we'll make it an aggravated assault. And then we'll give you 15 years.
Wow.
And, that's the deal.
That's ridiculous.
And it is, well, the argument comes back, and it's a point your listener should know. Yes, it is ridiculous, but, it's their money. And, it's our money.
It's our money. Right.
And, if you're going to really gear up, to go at it with these folks, you're going to have to spend a lot of money on it, and that's okay with me. But everybody should know, ultimately the people rule. They don't vote for prosecutors in New Jersey, so it's very hard. It's a more diffuse system than a lot of the West and the South, where they vote directly for the district attorneys. But the point of it all is this: that the plea bargain, and I never thought about it till I got on a parole board and I started seeing cases. I remember one in Burlington County. I forget the guy's name. The bottom line was 3 over a holiday weekend, I think over Christmas. When I came in to open up after that, there was a McDonald's in Burlington City on Route 130. And they opened up to find 3 of the workers bound up and dead in a freezer.
Aww.
And I went back and I was... the case just rankled me, especially because I used to eat there all the time. But it just rankled me.
Right.
And I said, wait a minute, I'm going to take a look at this. So I got the files, and it turns out that this guy was a very dangerous guy. And he committed a robbery at the Burlington Mall and did all kinds of bad things. Was, I think, charged with attempted murder or whatever. And they pled it way down. And he got out in like 3, 4, 5 years.
Wow.
And he wasn't out a week when he went and did this.
That's what I'm saying. Yes.
Then I started really waking up to that, and so I started to study it and so on. And if you don't, if you don't have the victims or someone representing the victims, but someone's representing the victims are not. They don't sit at the table, with the prosecutors. And so they cut their own deals, and the prosecutors and the DAs, and
wow.
They said, well, we're getting them jail time, and we're making the system work faster because we went to all trials, blah 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 blah. It's true.
And it is. And Andy, the thing is that they go to jail, they have rights. I mean, they exercise, they all become attorneys or preachers. I mean, they get 3 square meals. They have a life of luxury, unless they're unless they're somewhere where, they're taken care of by the other inmates. And let me ask you a question that I had heard, that if a criminal's in jail and he is a child molester or child killer, don't they take care of them in jail? So I've heard, but obviously they didn't take care of this McGowan.
No, it's old news.
That is.
That's
okay.
Something that was prevalent. It's like when prisoners had honor, but
yeah, that's redundant. Yes.
Yeah, and I heard that, and I had heard that about cop killers.
Yep.
And all this stuff, but by and large,
it's not true.
That by and large, it's not true. I'm sure there's some cases in different places where guys get toasted, but it's not the same.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the same as it was when I was first waking up to this. So the answer is maybe.
Maybe. Okay.
I wouldn't count on it.
Okay. And
if you want to know where the most miserable place to be is, that's Trenton State Prison.
Is it?
Wins hands down. That always wins.
Oh, really?
And that's a miserable place to be, frankly. And I wouldn't want to be there. And that's our only, what I would call, big house in New Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the places are pretty bad, but by and large, it's the old story. Don't expect anybody else to do for you. Don't expect a bunch of criminals who have all their own side deals going on to basically say, well, he'll get his in jail. Maybe, maybe not.
Exactly.
I wouldn't count on it. It's not something that I would say, well, we'll give, we got to watch out for this guy in jail. No, let him watch out for himself.
Yeah, and I think the only ones that maybe get a little bit more protection is the mob. Gotti, when they go into jail or whatever, I think that they are pretty well protected. But I don't consider, I'm sorry, I don't consider them criminals. I don't consider them rapists or murderers. I mean, they're businessmen who end up in jail because, they're against the FBI. I'm just not a big fan of the FBI, and the FBI is always after your of course, your mob. In fact, tonight at 8 o'clock, there's going to be a good show on. I think it's Gravano's daughter is going to talk about the bull. Gravano, his daughter is going to be interviewed on ABC tonight at 8 o'clock. If anybody wants to watch it, but let me ask you this: so the victims are the victims. Do they? If they rape, murder a child or whatever, they're not treated any differently, correct, Andy? I mean, when they go into prison.
Not as a rule.
Wow.
It's not something you can expect anymore like you used to expect it in, say, the 50s and the 60s.
Right.
It's just not something. It may happen, but, every case I ever got, I always look through the charges.
Yeah.
They call them blue sheets. They're serious disciplinary charges. And I saw a few that I thought might have been related to that. But by and large, if they get clocked once, they put them in protective custody or take them out of that kind of situation. And
wow.
These guys are not aggressive to each other most of the time. So like Midstate, I don't know what it is now, but Midstate was the main place they used to put when I was there, sex offenders. There was very little violence there.
Wow, really?
They all thought they were all the other ones were right.
I get him. Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
So if you put a real tough guy there, you're not so tough if you go around beating up on some of the words they use for these people.
Yeah,
so
exactly. But Andy, let me ask you a question. So when these criminals get out, what is the average that they're going to get out? Like you said about this really tough, this bad guy that was out and he murdered these 3 innocent people and put them in the freezer. What is the average that they're going to commit another crime, which I think they will? I mean, how would you say how many like 5 out of 10, 8 out of 10 if they're let out again, or they get out in no time at all? They're out there on the street again committing the same crime or something.
Crime?
Yes.
Very high.
It is. Okay.
Another violent crime, a little bit lower, but it's very real. The probation and the parole systems are overwhelmed for supervision. assuming that in this day and age you can supervise anybody.
Yes, you can't.
These ankle monitors, I've heard, I've been around long enough, I've heard every new thing that comes around,
Mm-hmm.
Ankle monitors, this and that, GPS, whatever. They're much. I remember when the ankle monitors first came out, any inmate who had a pet would take the monitor off and put it on their pet. So like a dog or a cat walking around the house.
Oh, my God.
So it would show activity, and the guy was out committing trouble.
That's amazing. I mean, who'd think? You've seen it or whatever. I'm sure you've seen everything being on the parole board and being chairman of the parole board. But Andy, I'd like to just switch it over a little bit to protecting our children.
Yes.
Again, I know that's a big part of you, and I know that's why you got involved with Rosemary D'Alessandro's case with Joan.
Yes.
Now, tell us, how can parents? And I know I've asked this before when you were on one other time. How do we teach our children to be aware of predators? How do we teach the parents?
Okay, I have it here. John Douglas's book, which I mentioned many times, Journey into Darkness.
Journey into Darkness.
John Douglas.
Mm-hmm.
I have it in paperback. It says here I bought it for $6.99. This was probably 10 years ago, so I don't think anybody's going to go broke getting it.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the sections is about juvenile crime, and John has it written down. Anybody can buy the book, and I would do it, but it says to the parents, this is what it says to the parents: know where your children are at all times. Be familiar with their friends and daily activities. Be sensitive to changes in your children's behavior. They are a signal that you should sit down and talk to your children about what caused the changes. Be alert to a teenager or adult who is paying an unusual amount of attention to your children and giving them inappropriate or expensive gifts. Teach your children to trust their feelings. So what we're talking here is a little bit of supervision and a lot of love, but then they got to go together. And assure them that they have the right to say no to what they sense is wrong. Mm-hmm. Listen carefully to your children's fears and be supportive in all your discussions with them. Teach your children that no one should approach them or touch them in a way that makes them feel uncomfortable. If someone does, they should tell you immediately. Be careful about this is important. Be careful about babysitters and any other individuals who have custody of your children.
Wow.
And that's one part.
Yes.
And then there's another part which is even more basic, where John talks about basic, the real basic rules as for how to, never leave your child alone, in a mall, or this, that, and the other thing.
Right.
But how can you prevent it? You prevent it like you prevent anything else. John's rule guidelines are terrific.
Yes.
And he has a chart there where he takes up what goes on, what should happen at various ages, because, you're not going to get the same cooperation of a 16-year-old than you are of an 8-year-old.
Absolutely. And
John runs through the whole thing. And the most important thing to tell the parents is pay attention. Pay attention to your kid. Account for him or her every second of the day.
I agree.
And that's why sometime maybe we'll get to talk about schools.
That's your next visit on the show. We'll be talking about the schools, what teachers are supposed to teach and so on and so forth, which is something I would never think about. We all think it comes from the parents. And John, children are taught to respect adults. Well, most children are. I was. So if an adult is doing something to them that's inappropriate, many children will allow it because they say, well, it's an adult. They can do it. They're supposed, they're adults. And no, absolutely not. And I think maybe that's why a lot of these things happen to the young children, because it's an adult.
Correct.
Is this true?
That's correct. And the schools, I live in Virginia, where they're having a huge ruckus because the new governor that was elected, thank God, he ran on the platform of parents.
Yes.
Of, elevating the rights of parents.
Right.
And if there could be the resistance to this guy in some of the public schools, it's embarrassing. It reminds me of the resistance when they try to integrate the schools. It's just horrible. And the schools, the plea bargaining. I wish we had more time, but we could do that another time because I'm happy to talk about it.
Yes,
anytime. But as far as I'm concerned, the schools are no longer. Who's our protective agencies? Formal agencies.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And they send these
juvenile court. Have you ever been to juvenile court?
No, I've never have, thank goodness.
Especially in the big county. It's
horrible.
It's not good. And of course the judges say they're great, but that's okay.
I'm sure they're going to, of course.
They're better than me, but it doesn't matter. And the other thing is that the schools.
Right.
I mean, the schools were given the right, in loco parentis instead of parents or in lieu of parents.
Yes.
They're given that kind of a stature.
Mm-hmm.
You are operating on behalf of the parents, and they forget that.
Yes, and
it's terrible.
And Andy, here's the thing too. Look at this kid that shot. I mean, the teachers were there. They saw him drawing these pictures. Why didn't they say?
Yeah.
Michigan? Yes, and they allowed him to stay, and then he shot these kids, killed these beautiful children, and the parents, of course, were they of course also got I think they're going to be going behind bars also. But the thing is that these teachers, they see it, just immediately take that kid out and segregate him from the other kids, send him home whether he wants it or not. When we went to school, that's how it was. Today, it's just so lenient. It's horrible, and I think that's why. Too lenient.
It is. I mean, I think about my father's generation. My father was born in 1918.
Wow.
He grew up in Brooklyn, New York, in the heart of the Jewish ghetto. 1 million people in that ghetto, Brooklyn.
Yeah.
And he told me, he went double shifts his whole way. But he never. He said the school. I said, was it rough in school? He said outside, but not inside.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
The kids outside were what they were. They were, punks. But he said inside the school, they didn't say anything.
It's changed.
And the way it was for everywhere. Not just about Jewish kids. I'm talking about Italian, Irish, Polish.
Absolutely.
Whoever they are.
Exactly.
That was the rules of the day. Mm-hmm. And I know even for me, when I was in school, if I was in grammar school, and my father got a phone call from the teacher, and I heard that, I just went and hid. I didn't know what I did.
I know. It was never
we were always automatically wrong.
Absolutely, Andy. You were raised the same way that I was, and I think that those methods need to come back. And Andy, we're coming to the end of the show, but No, you were wonderful. It was so informative, and I want you to come back and talk about what should be taught in the schools. I also want to talk about these lifers, like the Bundys and all them of the world, why they stay on death row so long. That'll be our next topic for visiting with Andy.
That's your courts, folks.
I hear ya. Andy, thank you so much. God bless you, and stay safe, and we will talk very soon. It's always a pleasure and an honor.
And I hope all your animals
Thank you, Andy. God bless you. And thanks to all of you. We love you out there. Thanks for listening tonight. Have a safe weekend, and thank you, Tasha.
Or smartphone and go to